Hello, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to today's very exciting Let's Talk About COVID-19 talk. I am Amy Henson. I'm a staff scientist at Science North, and we are partnering today with Laurentian University to bring you this talk. And we're bringing researchers on with us today to talk about, is the COVID-19 vaccine our way out of the pandemic? And I know that this is hitting everybody's mind this morning. Listening to the news this morning, it's all over the news. Just this week, the very first out of clinical trial vaccine was given out in the UK. So this is incredibly topical. We couldn't have planned it any better, but I am very excited about this talk today. Before we begin, I am going to bring on Dr. Tammy Eager. Tammy is going to welcome us from Laurentian. So welcome, Tammy.
Thank you so much, Amy. Bienvenue, Annie, Kweke, Wache. On behalf of Laurentian University, it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to this event today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and further recognize that Laurentian University and Science North are located on the traditional lands of the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabeg, and that the greater city of Sudbury also includes the traditional lands of the Wahnapitae First Nation. Despite the challenges of face-to-face events due to COVID-19, technology has enabled all of us to gather virtually in a way that we would have never imagined before. It's incredible that we're here today together from across the country and likely from around the world. In my role as the Vice President of Research at Laurentian University, I've seen firsthand the engagement and excitement and enthusiasm and willingness of our exceptional, talented researchers to support the fight against COVID-19 and the strengthening of partnerships like the one with Science North here today. And this partnership has allowed us to come together and imagine new ways to reach new audiences. So for example, the Let's Talk COVID-19 series we started back in March and it continues today. And I'm so excited for the conversation today on vaccines and COVID-19. So Amy, back to you to guide us through the next hour. Let's talk COVID-19 and vaccines.
It's going to be a very big topic, that is for sure. So COVID-19 and vaccinations, I'll tell you, there's so much information that is out there. I know that I see it through some of the science portals, some of the research portals that I do, but I also see it all over the place on things like the news, on my social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever it happens to be. I see this information. And when I look at it, I know some of it's true. I know some of it isn't. And then I also know that some of it is kind of malicious. There's malicious intent behind it. And one of our goals today is to help dispel a lot of the myths behind vaccinations, to get to the true story of it and to kind of decipher our way through some of the misconceptions, misinformation, or disinformation that might be out there that we've seen. So I can't wait to bring on our speakers for today. We have two people who are joining us from Laurentian University. First of all, we have Dr. Alain Simard. He is an associate professor with the Medical Science Division at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. Welcome, Alain. And secondly, we have Dr. Farouk Jabin. She's an adjunct professor with the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. She's coming to us from Toronto this morning. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. So this is one of the things that one of the talks I think that I have been the most excited about. And I know that people are going to have questions, they're going to want to comment. So if you are listening today, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook, right in the comments below, you can put your questions in here for Alain or Farouk. You can put commentary, and my job is to bring up those questions and that commentary for our speakers to talk to you today. So don't hesitate to do that. Please put that into the chat below, and we will get to your questions. So that's kind of starting off. So I know that we are all kind of in this new weird normal, right? We're wearing face masks, we social distance from one another. We're coming up to, of course, the holiday break. And, during the holiday break, we might want to go see family. But one of the really cool things that's coming out right now and what's in the news is the thing that we've been waiting the longest for, which is this vaccine. And we've seen this week the first vaccinations being given outside of clinical trials over in the UK. And so I can't think of a more timely topic that we can do for this week. I know I just got my flu shot on Monday, so I making sure that I'm protecting myself against one type of virus. COVID-19 is a completely different type of virus. And so what I really want to know is, one of the things that I didn't quite realize was exactly how vaccines work in our body. I don't think we know as much as we need to about how vaccines work, how they're made. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So maybe I'll get you to start off. So tell us about, how does a vaccine actually work?
Yes, that's a great question. So essentially, in order to understand how a vaccine works, we have to understand how our immune system works. So typically, if our body gets infected by a virus, for example, we'll take that example because that's the most important one for today. That virus enters our body, and our immune cells need to be trained to be able to recognize it, right? So the first time that they recognize it, the immune response is going to be somewhat weak, and it's going to be a bit slow because the cells need to kind of multiply, get more immune cells to be able to get rid of that virus. So essentially, that's what a vaccine does. What we do, or what the vaccine does, is we inject, depending on the vaccine, sometimes it can be like a dead version of the virus, or it can just be parts of the virus, so some of the proteins. But essentially what that's going to do is it's going to give a signal to our immune cells to say, hey, if ever you see this, you need to get rid of it. So that's essentially how vaccines in general work. The one that we're talking about now is a new type of vaccine. So it does, it does provide some new mechanisms, some new ways to be able to train our immune system against COVID, for example.
So tell us a little bit about what makes this new vaccine so unique compared to our old vaccines.
Yeah, so most of the old vaccines, like I was mentioning, is that we'd inject either parts or a whole bacteria or a whole virus that were killed off so that it wouldn't be dangerous to us, or some proteins. In this case here, what we're doing, the vaccine does, is that we're injecting some mRNA. So it's essentially some parts of the genetic material of the vaccine, and of the virus, I should say. And the reason we do this is because of how viruses work. So essentially, viruses, once they get inside our body, they infect some cells. And they spend most of their time inside our cells, multiplying and making more viruses. And eventually, they'll kill the cell, or they'll figure out a way to go out of the cell so they can go and infect more cells. But most of the virus, most of the time, is inside our cells. So what happens here is that we're injecting this mRNA so that it gets inside our cells, that our cells make this protein, and it's one protein from the virus only, not all of them. So we're not making the virus, it's just one protein. And then essentially by using our cells to make the protein, that's how we're training our immune cells to recognize that one protein. So if ever the virus comes in, our immune cells are already going to be ready to recognize the virus and try to get rid of it.
Oh, that's amazing. Like I think this is one of the things that we get just sort of trying to grab our minds around, how science is changing and how we develop vaccines and how we develop new drugs and all those different types of things, that we're always trying to find new ways to do it, right? So we're seeing a new virus come out. We have to be a little bit more, I don't know, like looking for new ideas and new solutions to this. And I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with the COVID-19 vaccination has been really about, because scientists have been working on this all over the world, whether you're talking about a vaccine from one drug company versus another drug company. And there's all of these different steps that go into play to make sure that, first of all, that we find a vaccine that works. And then second of all, that it's tested properly. Now, Farouk, can you take us through a little bit about clinical trials, right? And what kind of clinical trials may have happen when you develop a vaccine? What do those clinical trials look like? Do they look different for different types of drug companies or different types of vaccines?
Yeah, actually, thank you very much, Amy. This is really important, like how the vaccines and all the therapeutics are developed, especially the modern age. It's very important, especially when it's pandemic, and we have to handle at this disruption at like on urgency basis. So there are actually the clinical trials are three phases, but there are preclinical trials too, especially for this Moderna and Pfizer. This is actually a synthetic candidate. The messenger RNA has been synthesized. It was designed computationally, which maybe you remember that I gave a talk on machine learning, involvement of machine learning and computational techniques for the design and development of the therapeutics. And they did the same, both the companies and all other companies did the same, which are working on the recombinant methods and DNA and RNA based vaccines, because it's easier, fast, and forward track. And after that, after synthesis, purity, and certain other tests which are relevant with the chemistry of that particular candidate, they went to the preclinical trials on the mice, especially, and creating that how they behave and the side effects on these individuals. And from that, they went to the first phase clinical trials. Generally, conventionally, these are the phase one, phase two, and phase three. Like phase one is typically from 20 to 80 or 100 people, just to see the efficacy, that how it's working, and also the side effects, like mean how its toxicity and how it's the first behavior will be coming, and after that switching towards then the next clinical trial. It's also in the small group of the people, but it categorized like what specific like gender and the age and demographic region. That's a small chunk of the people taking from different batches, kind of sporadic, so that which would be the real candidate for the vaccine or expecting the vaccine. So this is also, but it's also a small number of the group of number of the group people. And it also to study the efficacy and then the dosage level. It determined the dosage level, which has been already determined in preclinical trials on the animal models. And dosage level, and also the efficacy, effectiveness, and again the safety is always the concern. After passing these two clinical trials, the third clinical trial is on the larger and the broader group, and it should be in the different demographic regions, like different continents even, and different age groups who are like expecting this. For example, this Moderna and Pfizer, they did their Moderna did on 30,000 people their phase three clinical trials, and they're still asking for the more number of the people. It's still going on. It's not like the data they have, they submitted to the FDA for the approval, but they're still to study the efficacy and also the side effects on the broader scan. And for Pfizer, they studied it on more than 43,000 people, so that they should have the good feedback from that how these are working. And at this stage, is most concern is the safety, because already the dosage is maintained and effectiveness is already studied in the first two trials. It also studied the effectiveness, but the major concern is the safety, the side effects, that how it's behaving and what are outcome. That's what during these first two clinical trials, and this the Pfizer's vaccine is out of the in the first phase, out of 95 candidates, the 90 got the COVID, and 90 did not get the COVID, and only 5 get COVID. That's what they ranked it as the 94.5%. And same, almost similar studies happen and similar results happen with the Moderna and Pfizer, sorry, and they are 90%. Like they are a little bit lesser than Moderna, but they are 90% effect. There is 90% effective, and they are having the good result. In the current scenario, to speed up and to study the efficacy and the side effects as side by side in parallel basis, they divided the clinical trials in phase 1A, phase 2, phase 1A, phase 2A, kind of like 3, 6, rather than jumping directly from phase 1, phase 2 to phase 3 stage, so that they should have the broader aspects. And because the most concern was the safety, especially for the messenger RNA, since it's a synthetic candidate and it's new technology, and the delivery For the first time, the Pfizer is using that delivery system which was developed in 2009, 2005, and it's a nanoparticle-based delivery system, because the problem with the messenger RNA peptides and the protein is like body take them as a food, and it like digest and decompose them and take them as an antigen or antibody kind of reactions create. So to save it, we need to have a proper particular system of delivery which like take it safer to the body cells and the tissues where it is really needed to act on the targets. So that's what that delivery system Pfizer is using for the nanoparticle delivery drug delivery system, which was developed in 2005, and it's for the first time they are using it. And same modernized doing. That's what they have the clinical trials in phase 1A, phase 2A, phase 3A, like 20 to 90, and then going so on. And even they have 2A and 2B. And similarly for phase 1, they have 2A and 2B, and then they switch to the 3. Like this means that they ideally like have the 4 clinical trial stage. Sometimes the vaccines are also expected to send to the clinical 4 stage, when it's like for example, the 2 allergy cases are reported in the UK, then maybe the regulatory body will suggest that go into the phase 4 clinical trials. But still, since 90% and 94% efficacy, and this type of the like small number of the side effects when it's pandemic, it's really a good sign, and hope like it should be rolled out as soon as possible.
Excellent. So we had a question come in, and I sort of think we kind of have answered it, but I'd love to repeat this. So their concern is with small clinical trials. So the first trials that we sort of came up, these phase 1, phase 2 trials, they are with smaller groups of people. And those trials are really meant, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure we get this information to everybody. So those smaller trials are really meant to see whether or not the vaccine works against protecting the body.
Yes.
That's kind of the goal of that. But then we go into a bigger trial. Right? And the bigger trial is about whether or not it's safe for humans, like whether or not it's safe on like a larger population scale. Now, the 48,000 or 43,000 people that you talked about in this trial, is that enough? Is that a big enough trial to look at the safety?
Yeah, but they are planning to go for the 100,000 as well. That's what I asked. They are adding the more and more people on their websites. When you go like visit their websites, they have still like a panel, like you can add as a volunteer, and as well because they, and also as a part of the phase 3 clinical trials, and they will be submitting data to the FDA, and that's how the drugs are developed during the developmental stage. Even if they are approved after the approval, this is the stage even the regulatory bodies approve. When it's administered to the people, because it's the first candidate and the first time, they requesting, the manufacturer is requesting and the brand owner is requesting the feedback. Like feedback mean how this vaccine behaved, what were the efficacy in the number of the people it were delivered, and it's also kind of included into the clinical trial, because the data will be considered, and if there is something considerable, then the regulatory bodies, the regulatory authorities will give suggestion to the manufacturer to like revisit this and bring some improvement or whatever the needs are. That's what is important for the phase 1 specifically, when it's usually 20 to 80 people, because in the phase 1 they do not go to the large group of the people because of the safety concern. So it's really like very, very critical, like who is like candidate, and that's what it's very expensive as well. They have the company, because they have to pay a lot of money to those, because they're not even sure what will happen, how it will behave, and these are all adult, and usually like the people between the age of 25 to 45 kind of, so that they are young, healthy enough, so that they can cope with that. And that's
so can people volunteer to do this? Is that something that people volunteer to do? How are
usually company pay huge amount, but still there are the photographs on the website of Moderna and Pfizer. People always love to save and do sacrifice for the other people, because it's pandemic and everyone want to play some role. People did actually, and it's appreciable. Yeah, I myself was thinking like if they really need, I can go, because at this stage anyone can do that, like volunteer, because now it's at phase 3, and phase 3 mean like it's enough safe to be trustworthy, like to get administered to the people. So it's, yeah, because in the first clinical trial, which is on the 20 to 80 people, it's the most considerable thing is to evaluate the safety and immune response, that how it generates the immune response. And then next day they added actually that's phase 2A and phase 2B. And then this was divided into two, like to study and to determine the effective dose, that how much dose is required, like Pfizer and Moderna both uses one microgram, zero point 0.5 kind of things, that how, and AstraZeneca, it happened with AstraZeneca, like 50% they gave, and then that's what is the most important, the effective dosage level, and then safety experience, expanded safety experience, that how it will be. Then jumping to the different demographic, like the bigger group, different continent, like Pfizer is doing in 3 different countries, and they are still adding, yeah, people to just go see that how it's working.
Right. So we have another question coming in. And Farouk, maybe what I'll get you to do, perfect. Yeah, we're just going to mute you while it's just to get rid of some of the background noise, and that's okay. So we hear it, everybody. So don't worry about it. We're going to fix it. All good. But we have another question coming in: is how, and this is for either Alain or Farouk to answer, but how would you be able to test the long-term effects of a vaccine and the secondary effects that may or may not show up in the future? Because we are used to, when we're doing vaccine or drug trials, right, they go on for longer periods of time than what this particular one is going. We understand the urgency in our world today. We need to get our planet and our lives back to some kind of normal, which I can see why we're pushing out this vaccine quickly. But how do we look at like the long term, if there are any long term effects at all, and then the efficacy of it? Like, how good is this going to work on the long term? Am I going to need a booster shot in 3 years? Like I had to have with one of my vaccines as a child. How do we look at that into the future? I'll open it up to anybody who'd like to answer.
Yeah, I can answer or start, and then Farouk can add if I miss anything. I think there are a few questions in there, and each one can be somewhat treated a bit separately. But overall, essentially, especially in this case, because the phase 3 trial was only done for a period of a few months, right? Typically, in this would go on for about 2 years. That's what usually the FDA and all the regulators are going to ask for, is about 2 years of data in terms of safety. In this case here, we have a few months. So, but because of the pandemic and the urgency, they decided that it's worth rolling out, especially considering the fact that in those first 2 months that the side effects were considered to be very minimal and nothing severe in the clinical trial. Now that the vaccine is going to be rolled out, they're going to continue accumulating data, right? So, and this is true for all vaccines for sometimes periods of many years after that they're rolled out, where our health systems, so doctors or the nurses or anybody that basically administers the vaccines, they have basically a platform, an online platform where they can go and report adverse events. So there are a lot of different mechanisms where essentially the data is going to continue to be collected, and it's going to inform us as to what the safety long-term is for the vaccines. In terms of how effective it is in the general population, because we have to keep in mind that in clinical trials, everything is controlled, right? So they recruit very specific age groups, very specific demographics. Usually, people that are considered to be at higher risk are not going to be involved in clinical trials, whereas now it's rolled out to the general population. For those, again, we're still going to be able to get more data on the the efficacy over the long term. This is going to be mostly done through epidemiological studies, where hopefully we'll start seeing drops in number of cases. And hopefully, if ever, one of the things that I'm hoping that testing centers are going to do now is, let's say that you go get tested for COVID and you turn out positive, that there's going to be a little question that you have to answer as to whether or not you got the vaccine. So hopefully we'll be able to get that kind of data to be able to inform us as to how effective this vaccine really is. And I think one of the biggest questions here is for how long? Because right now we know that the vaccines induce an immune response. It seems to be a very good one, but we only have data for a short period of time. In a year from now, like many vaccines, they start losing their efficacy, some of them after a year, so we'd need a booster shot. Some others last a lifetime. For this one, we don't know. So that's going to take a lot of time before we can answer that question.
Go ahead, Farouk. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's actually for specifically the messenger RNA. That's what the manufacturer and specifically the big giant pharmaceuticals are moving towards that, and especially the scientific community as well, the people who are working, especially the virologists, rather than focusing on the attenuated virus or bacteria and the live virus or bacteria because it has some problems. It's a synthetic part. So after a year, maybe we will be getting the mutation in the virus and it get ineffective, as has happened with the H1N1 swine flu. But for this, since it's a synthetic one, so it's very easy, like it's kind of trained. It's very easy again to train it by little bit tweaking, and then a system is generated. It has a platform. It called a platform to manufacture and synthesize. They already tailored that platform, both the big companies and also the other one which are working on this recombinant technology. So they already tailored that platform, and they would need a very little. And we are hoping, and being a chemist, we are expecting that this messenger RNA vaccine will be effective even with the little mutation of the virus as well, until and unless it's like totally other way around and it's mutated totally, and it cannot recognize, the body cannot recognize it because it's the same. The messenger RNA is from the SARS-CoV coronavirus or something else. Otherwise, with the little mutation, a small, even a certain level of mutation would be handled by this messenger RNA. That's what all the community involved in this vaccination technology is believe that. And specifically, since it's synthetic, and then computational technology is also involved, they can tweak it a little bit in using the computational platform and predict its behavior and its efficacy, and then go on moving on to that. Already it's tailored, everything is already manufacturer have, so they can like bring its second version or kind of that. But still, I hope that it will be effective for next few years, and maybe more than even more than few years, because it's kind of synthetic and have different scene. I will take advantage of replying a question. What does the nanotechnology mean, Bruce Tennyson? Nanotechnology is actually the nanoparticles. Nanoparticles are the very, very nanoscales particles of any of the chemical or any of the chemical compounds. For example, specifically, they have the metals in the nano forms, and the nanotechnology is really, really effective. And the motto behind is that if I have a needle, I can lift the earth. The scientist who first introduced that, he just compared that I can lift the earth with the needle if it's having the effectiveness and all the properties of the nanoscale. It actually alleviate the property and all the shelf life, stability, and everything of that chemical, and when it's in the nanoscale rather than when it was in the particular normal stage. So how this nanotechnology work and why it's involved in vaccination and drug discovery, it's actually a drug development. It's actually the latest therapeutic delivery system, and it's kind of nowadays thought to be the most effective with the help of these very small nanoparticles involved and kind of wrapped, and when it's administered, it goes into the target typically, especially the where it is needed. And this the most effective part, especially when the Pfizer tested that, the problem with them is that their messenger RNA is highly sensitive, and it degrades very easily even inside the body before going, like training the immune system to develop the antibodies to like combat with that particular virus or bacteria. So that they, with this help of this nanotechnology, it increases its life, its stability, and it's even if its effectiveness. So when it's stable, of course it's effective, because it has the greatest span of time to remain inside the body, produce an effect with the antigen, and produce the antibodies, and train the immune system, and produce the give the messages to produce the that specific protein and engulf the viruses, etc. That's what this nanotechnology is important, and it's actually the new, and not new for our field, but it's still like kind of, and it's most effective and have the least side effects kind of things with that.
It's amazing, right? As we continue to develop new methods and new research and using, I never thought I'd live in a world where we're using synthetic mRNA, right, to build vaccines. It's amazing that where we develop new things, we can actually improve, right, how it's the delivery system and its effectiveness. And I think that is pretty interesting to talk about. So we've had a question come in, and one of the questions I think people are seeing in the media, we're talking a lot about how we, interact with each other, right, on the day-to-day basis. So, our suggestions right now, of course, if you're in a public space, that you need to be wearing a mask. And there's been some media organizations out there that have reported that if you have been vaccinated, that you still need to wear a mask because you could potentially still carry the virus. I don't know the truth in that, but I'm really hoping that maybe Elena, you could speak to this about, even if I have a vaccine, am I still carrying the virus? Can I still pass it along to others? What do we need to do in terms of our practices every day?
Yes, that's a very, very important question. It's probably one of the questions that's on the top of most of our minds, right? The short answer is that we're not sure yet. Okay? The reason being is partly because of, well, there are a lot of parts to this answer, but the first one is the way that the clinical trials were done. So if we take the Pfizer and the Moderna clinical trials and the data that we have yet so far, so they've shown they claim 90 or 94% effectiveness for the vaccine. But in reality, what they tested there are the symptoms. All right. So the way that those clinical trials were done is that they would only test their constituents, their participants, for COVID once they got symptoms. Okay. So fewer people got symptoms. So few, right? So we know that the vaccine works at preventing the symptoms. Whether it works at preventing infection, we can't tell from those two trials. Luckily, the one from Oxford and AstraZeneca did test routinely everyone on a weekly basis, from what I remember, whether they had symptoms or not. So they know whether people were infected with COVID and were just asymptomatic. Because we know that with COVID, quite a few or a large percentage of the people that get infected with COVID never show any symptoms at all. Okay. And what they do show is that their vaccine is effective at reducing the number of infections as well. All right. So I don't think that those data have been officially published. I think that there are more reports at this point, but at least it looks very promising. So that, again, is going to take a bit more time for us, for research to know whether people that have the vaccine, whether they can still be infected. And if they can still be infected, then yes, there's always a risk of being able to transmit it to others. Although if the vaccine is really keeping what we call the titer, the number of virus particles that we have in our body, if they do a good job at keeping them really low, then that risk of transmission would be very low as well. But unfortunately, we don't really have a clear picture of that. So what I think is going to happen is that even if we have the vaccine, that yes, those public health measures for wearing masks are still going to be around until we can properly answer that question. And it's going to be the safe thing to do. Because we simply don't know at this point how effective it is going to be. Maybe by next summer, maybe we're going to have a better idea. But I think that it's going to be somewhat of a more complicated one, and it's going to require a bit more research before we can properly answer that one.
Masks are such a hot topic, right? It seems to be a polarizing issue. It seems to be something that, I think to most people feels a little bit constraining and constricting. And I've almost seen masks now as like, if we can stop wearing masks, we get back to our new normal, right? I think that's how people are kind of feeling about it. But at the same time, and maybe it means that even having a vaccine might mean later on that we maybe necessarily can't stop wearing masks right away, but it might mean that we're able to do things like travel a little bit more and open up some of those other things. So and I think the key here too is talking about symptoms, and because our biggest concern with COVID-19 is people who experience incredibly violent symptoms, right? And so whether it's somebody who may not have any previous health concerns before, because we have seen cases of that, or people who do have previous health conditions that may complicate with COVID-19. I think so even if we are able to transmit the virus, even if we can get those types of symptoms lower, we really are doing our part, aren't we?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right? So the main mission here obviously would be to get rid of COVID. That would be the ideal situation. But at the other end, as long as we're really protecting those more vulnerable people, and especially reducing the very severe symptoms, which can lead to death, or another thing are some really long-term effects, right? We really don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are. There are a lot of reports of long-term neurological symptoms, for example. Some people, even almost a year after they've gotten they test negative for COVID, they still have a lot of symptoms. So if we can reduce all of those, then I would say it would still be a successful vaccine. If we have to wear a mask in public, I know I can only speak for myself. To me, it's a small price to pay to protect others. But I know that, it changes the dynamic. So sometimes someone says something and you're smiling at them, they can't really see you smiling. So it really changes how we interact. But for me, one of the key points is if this vaccine can allow us to at least start seeing other people, expanding our closer circles with family, being able to travel to see family that are down south, for example, to me, then I'm going to be celebrating, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'll wear a mask anytime if I can start doing that. So again, it's all a matter of perspective. And hopefully we can get to the point where we can stop worrying about masks as well.
So we've had a question come in about antibodies, and I don't think we're going to be able to talk about vaccines unless we talk about antibodies. So this is a very good question. So this person's asking is that if we've had a positive lab result, so if we've gone to get tested, we've had a positive COVID-19 test, we must therefore have antibodies in our system because our body's been fighting off this virus. Do we still get the vaccine? Are we able to get COVID-19 again? Should we get the vaccine? Is it safe for us? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's another very interesting question, and I'm not too sure that I have the answer to that one. Theoretically speaking, if you already have antibodies against the virus, that you do have an immune response against it, and you should have some level of protection. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is that the antibody tests aren't the most accurate, right? Mm-hmm. They do have a significant amount of false positives, false negatives. So there would always be a risk. So this is one of the questions, of you can probably not get it, but you have to consider, is there any harm that would come from getting it? It would essentially act as a booster shot for you at that point. And it might prolong or make you even more effective at clearing the virus should you ever get infected again. So again, it's one that I'm not too, I can't precisely give a precise answer on.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Farouk. There you go.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with Alan, because it's kind of literally complicated at this stage. But since we are expecting the mutation, so the person who was already affected, maybe the virus which he got has the little bit different genetic makeup and genetic code, and his his immune system was trained for that specific genetic code, so the antibodies may be for that specific genetic code. So as a safe and precautionary measures, I think there is a still need for the vaccine, especially this messenger RNA. This is kind of uh, focusing around it can handle the different mutated strains as well. This is synthesized and trained like it can handle the different mutated strain. It's not particularly for one particular code. They prepared it like it can handle a different demographic region, different stages, and different over the period. So I think that still there is a need of the vaccine. Although these people should, the group of the people who already have the antibodies, they should be kept. They should be for the later stage until the other people get it, but still to get safe, because no one knows that with the next because it's a pandemic, and we are expecting that all the community involved in these studies expecting that it can retain in the society as a general kind of like general flu. So this is always better to like get vaccinated so that they have the antibodies specifically for the different mutated genes, and their messenger RNA can train their immune system to handle that particular one.
Yes, that's a great point. And I think that one of the things to keep in mind as well is that this virus has already mutated.
Yes.
We know that we already have a few different
Yes.
strains of this virus, right?
Yeah, we are fortunate, like the mutation is not that drastic. Like it's kind of like as if it was in the case of the swine flu. It's actually literally it's the fortunate for entire world that it's coming from the Asia to North America, but still the mutation level is not that hype that which caused like you have to specifically develop this different vaccines for that specific mutated cell. But now it's like we can use it, the vaccines which are developed, it can be used for all the demographic region at the different parts and all this, even the age level, etc. So it's also one of the good point that it's not mutated. Yes, it is mutated already, and with the virus its problem is like it mutated very fast, but still it's all the genetic codes which are until now reported, these are not that much drastically different from each other, so it's easy to handle, but still we need vaccines.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So we had a question come in, and I think this is a really important piece of information to address with this virus. I'm hoping one of you might be able to help me address this. So we know that this virus, COVID-19, started off as a zoonotic disease. So something that is spread from an animal to a human. And one of the questions that we have coming in was about, if we only vaccinate people that's near the zoonotic source of the spread, is that not good enough? But I think I kind of know the answer, but I'd love to hear from one of you on that one.
Yeah, it's now community spread. We are far away from that zoonotic part and zoonotic zone. It's like now under the table. It's community spread, and it's totally now in community. It's man to man, and then contacts, and it's kind of lifting trajectory that how much the contacts are affected from one person. So it's not like the people who are involved with the zoonotic stuff needs a vaccine are most vulnerable or most like kind of on the forefront, and it's actually community spread, and everyone is equally, I think, special. It's true that the people who are working in the front line, like the healthcare worker or the in the grocery stores, even because they have the public interaction very like at a close level, even if they are wearing mask, I don't think the mask which we are wearing, it has the spaces and it's that effective. But to some extent it's helping, and also for our own satisfaction that our brain can message, okay, I'm safe, like I'm not getting that virus. So otherwise it's not that effective to help. So it's actually now community spread. It's going from person to person and kind of that, and even the surfaces, you touch the surfaces, and it's again community spread. So that's what everyone needs vaccine actually. At different, yeah, the grouping is really like good. Like even the Health Canada, WHO, what they the strategy which they outline, and that the for the health worker, the grocery stores worker, and those people who are essential workers, and they are like very, they are exposed highly, so they need there's this first their first right, and secondly those who have the pre-existing health conditions and the old age group, because especially in the long-term health conditions, because long-term health caring centers, because they are the people are in close contact, so it's important for them. And then there should be different groups, and for the until next year there would be huge, because the 10 candidates are nowadays in the phase 3 clinical trials, except Moderna, Pfizer, and then J&J. There are 10 candidates in the phase 3 clinical trials around the world. So these would be soon coming up with and meet the need, and hopefully.
Absolutely. That's kind of it's not a I could have imagined this in my head. It's not a conveyor belt of the zoonotic disease keeping being spread. Once it has been at a point where it can be transmitted from human to human to human, we're now at a point where with community spread, this is no longer necessarily a concern of a zoonotic disease, but of a human disease that is spread between all of us. And I love your point of, we're all equally susceptible to it, and and those who are definitely in frontline workers, who we all greatly appreciate during this time, definitely are at a bit more risk. So because of their constant communication with different people. So because we're doing this today with Laurentian University, Ellen, I would love to hear what kind of research are you doing, or what kind of research is going on at Laurentian today that about with COVID-19, and what's going on with Laurentian with that front.
All right, great question. So I'm not familiar with all of the research that is going on. I do know that there are some studies that are in the works to more on the epidemiological or the clinical aspect of COVID. In terms of basic science, I know that I myself don't work directly on COVID itself. I know that initially I had thought of a few ideas. But one of the issues for me is that I work a lot with humans, right? So we take human participants and we require human blood draws. And for the time being, because of COVID, it's a little bit more difficult to enroll human participants. So I can only speak about my own research for now, and from what I'm aware of that others are doing, but specifically on COVID, I think that my information is a bit limiting at that. I don't know, maybe Farouk would have an idea of what others are doing, if anybody else is doing any specific research on COVID.
I myself, thank you very much, Ellen. I myself is actually, since my specialty is computer-aided therapeutic discovery, I myself is working on designing therapeutics, basically with two of the projects, which I also submitted for the different fundings, although these were not approved. Ontario Together funds. These are about like using the machine learning and deep learning methods and different computational technologies to speed up the and have some predictive studies to speed up the discovery of the therapeutics for this and upper respiratory tract infections, especially with the coronavirus. I targeted the spike protein, which is especially the messenger RNA they are using, and then polymerase and proteases, so that we can handle it that and have the different technical strategies to study and like shortlist these trends. And it was drug repurposing as well, because the drug repurposing for therapeutic discovery always is a most effective and most the fast forward process, because the drugs are always tested for the safety, and now I have to like focus on the efficacy. So this is one of them, and everyone nowadays, that even the pharmaceutical industry is working on that. Second project is also from the mining the big data, special different data for the small molecules, and then finding out which one is effective in that. For vaccines, and I'm not. My specialty is also synthesis of these peptides and proteins, but I do not have resources. I would love to do something. If Laurentian can offer us something, like I should start at least, because this is the good time to do that. And some other people, like, they are also working on some the when during our town hall meeting, I came across like people are working really on good stuff, like mm, uh, discovering and inventing this then for the PPE disinfectant and antiseptic. I myself was involved in that, but since I was away and I could not do that. And some the data studies, especially the COVID data, some from, I think, humanity department, or I'm not well familiar, but people are working on that. And one more researcher, investigator is working on the different 19, and I have been in contact to do that how the for virus neutralization test. He's in he has some facilities to work on that, and but like different in different categories and different whatever they can do, people are working.
Great.
One more professor is working. I actually confuse the names because of not too much. That's what I'm not pointing out. Who one is working also on computationally aided, like some stuff. He was studying the targets and proteins which were under that.
Nice. It's amazing when we think about our research community here, in Northern Ontario, and in Canada, where it's not only like the hardcore, science and vaccine research that's going on, right? It's also, studies out in the public, whether it's a social science studies, how is this, affecting our mental health or our communities as a whole? And I think that there's some really amazing research going on. And I can't wait to talk more about this as we continue on over time to see, and as we're seeing results, it's going to be fantastic. We do have a question coming in, and I think this is really an interesting one. When do we know that this vaccine is going to be safe for children, considering most of the trials have been done on adults? Oh,
sorry.
Yep, you're good.
The problem is, like, since the children get infected with the COVID, but the children are a little bit safe because it's not that drastic. Death rate is very low, and even the critical stages are really, really low. And the body, I think it's their body weight or their active immune system that it can combat with the disease, and they get like really good in few days. My own niece, she is 1.5 year old. She caught COVID. The dad had been like really in critical condition. He captured from her. She traveled from in past February in 2029. Yeah, when the COVID started, 2020, and she was okay in just 2 days. 1.5-year-old kid, but the dad was like sick for like 3 weeks, and like literally like he was in critical stage. So the children, they transmit. They are actually dangerous to transmit to the adults. And the most cases and critical cases and the situations are reported in the adults, not in the children. That's what all the pharmaceutical companies are focusing on, the adults and the old age groups. Why they did not started from the old age group in the beginning? Because they were afraid if the old age group is specifically, most of the old age people are with the pre-existing health condition, their immune system is compromised or weak, or they are not able to like handle all that stress because of the this vaccine, which is not even studied properly and which is not listed what side effects they have. So they did not involve in them. So a safer chunk, healthy chunk of the population, especially from the 25 years or 18 years to 55 years, were involved. So that's what is the case. But for the children, hopefully they will. But if it's safer for the adults, I think it will be safer for the children, because children already have their strong immune system for this, specifically for coronavirus. There are very little cases of the any deaths or any critical conditions in the children. That's what the pharmaceutical companies, because it's urgency. We have to save the people. That's what they're focusing on, that particular chunk of the population which is most affected. So, and since they cannot like target the old age people because of their like their sensitive health issues. That's what they targeted on the adults and young, like kind of younger chunk, and then they will be going to administer that. But still, they added the 70 years old people are kind of like that, so that, and they are adding more until they will be confident, more confident that this there would not be the safety concern. Especially the FDA is also suggesting its process. Even the regulatory agencies will be visiting the manufacturing sites. They will be again and again asking them to submit the reports on quarterly basis, on monthly basis, on then on yearly basis, and that feedback and will be coming from the where the end user is. Like they are, for example, the Canada Health Canada is purchasing from them, and we are using here, and we are supposed to, and legally we are, and ethically, sorry, we are bound to give them the feedback that how it's working, so that if there is problem, they call it back. Right. Or do something like that. So children, since children are not vulnerable, they are vulnerable, they get infected, but not go to the critical stage. They handle it, their immune system handle it very well itself. That's what. But still, I think myself that since it's synthetic stuff, so it will be safer for the children as well.
Excellent.
If it's safer for the adult community. But of course, they will involve the children. And you know that we never specifically, when the disease is not specific in that group of the population, especially the children, it's not suggested and recommended to do the clinical trials on the children. No one likes and no one appreciates. That's the reason which I think is like, yeah, but that's a good question. They should involve a chunk, like at least few, like a group of the people as such, so that it can be studied well, that it's effective and it's safe for the children as well.
Mm-hmm. So we have another question coming in about just about the different kinds of vaccines that we've heard about. So we've heard about, that there's one type of vaccine that requires really, really, really cold storage. So which, minus 70 degrees. But then there's other vaccines that don't require that. And I don't know, what's the difference between those two vaccines, that one requires this super cold refrigeration versus the other one that does not? Because we can see that could cause a problem in terms of its dispersal, even in Canada, where, in right now when it is cold, but certainly in other countries where the temperatures are much warmer.
Pfizer's candidate is like really need the cryogenic conditions. That's what they are delivering it with their own containers, and that's the big like issue, like how it will be handled in minus 78. It's need like really, really low temperature, because the messenger RNA degrades very well. What Moderna did, because it's a synthetic candidate for them, they little bit optimized it. We call it in chemical language optimized. Optimized means the basis which is on the this messenger RNA, they change the sequence, the uracil which is present with the four main bases are there. They change it with the position. They change the positions. By changing that position, its stability increased like manifold, so that it is effective and it is like stable at the higher temperature for months. Like for as compared to, I have here the some figures, like for Moderna, like it's even at like 30 to 40 degrees Celsius it's effective, and in refrigerated it's effective for the 1 month, and for 30 to 40 degrees 12 days. And even it take out from the refrigeration, it's for the whole day. You do not need to like put it in refrigerator. It's safe, and it's really good part for that, because specifically the logistic issue, even Pfizer gives the give all this facilities, and then it's difficult to handle, because when the workers will take it out, then handling it and saving it will be, and maybe during the administration, during the handling, it get decomposed or degraded, then there is no point and there is no use. That's the biggest concern with that, and they are delivering all the technology with that and all the information, but still for that, the difference is how it was designed and manufactured.
Right.
This means it's defined stability and shelf life.
Right. And so as we continue, as the vaccines continue to develop, that delivery method will probably change over time as well, I would imagine, to make it easier and to make it better.
Yes, yes, of course, because it's a continuous process, and
Mhm.
and then already they have the manufacturing platform. It's since they this already trained, and they have to optimize it little bit to for the more effective results and more effective and with the stable shelf life. It will be a continuous process, because down the road we will need this vaccine as like other vaccines. This time, since it's pandemic and they have to handle the pandemic, so we need it like on urgency basis. But still, down the road, within a year or two, there would be some changes. Of course, I'm expecting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are just about running out of time. I have one more question for both of you. Farouk, I'm going to start with you. And this is the question of the day. And you can give me whatever opinion that you would like to give me, but I'd love to hear, is this vaccine our way out of the pandemic?
Yes. Yeah, because it's the only solution. We do not have therapeutics. We do not have any other solution. Just remodeling the lifestyle, that take masks, wear gloves kind of things, has never been a solution. It disrupted the economy. It turned upside down everything. It created the health issues, mental health issues, and everything. So this is the only solution and only hope that we are expecting that it will take us out from that. And since it will roll out soon. Within next week, we are expecting to be rolled out for the healthcare and priority. It's called priority group. For priority group, it will be rolled out soon, and then with the next 2 months until March, we are expecting for the general public. So, and this is the only solution, I think, from this.
All right, that's fantastic. Ellie, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah.
Is this vaccine our way out of the pandemic?
I'm going to give a slightly different answer. My answer is going to be yes and no. I think that it's going to be a great help. It's going to be a very powerful tool. And right now, one of the only tools that we have, right, to help us fight this pandemic. But I don't think it's going to completely get rid of COVID. We're still going to have to live with it for a very long time, maybe forever. But it may become one of those more seasonal or periodic infections, kind of like a cold, for example, where we don't have to worry so much about it. That's what we're hoping. So that's why my answer is a bit of both.
Answers. Oh my goodness. Well, we're out of time today. Sorry, Farouk, I'm gonna cut you off because we want to end on the hour. Make sure everybody gets to their jobs and gets to work and gets to school today. So, but thank you very much for joining us. I want to thank Ella and Farouk. Thank you very much for being our experts today. These conversations that we're having are so important. They're important for us to be having, not only with researchers and scientists, but within our social circles as well, and making sure that we're getting the right information that is valid, that's scientifically accurate, that's up to the latest day to day, because every day I am learning something new about vaccines or about COVID-19 every day that I open up my email or hear the news of the day. So I know it's really exciting, and we've got a little bit of a goal yet ahead of us, but I know there's much more to learn and much more to research out there. I just want to, this is our last Let's Talk About COVID-19 for 2020. We are going to head into another run in January. So our next one will be on January the 13th in the new year. And this one is, I also think is going to be very exciting. We are specifically targeting the idea of misinformation and disinformation. So the information that's out there, that's incorrect, that's infiltrating our lives, and how do we deal with it, and how do we separate the truth from the false? And it's going to be a very exciting. So join us again on January 13th. We can't wait to see you, and have a great winter break, and be safe as always.
Thanks, you too.